something like witch hazel, coconut oil, or even white vinegar that you probably have in the pantry. And then add an essential oil that is known to repel mosquitoes. So citronella, lemon, lavender, peppermint, those are a few that are known to keep mosquitoes away.
All right, thanks for joining us here on Morning Rush. I'm Lindsay Tuckman. Let's head over to Scripps News Live now with Veronica. I don't like thinking about mosquitoes. They are attracted to me for some reason, so this is the worst time of year for that.
No, I know, you and me both, but she had me at essential oils and lavender.
There you go.
Who knew?
Good to know.
Right? It doesn't even sound that bad when she puts it that way. All right, Lindsay, thank you so much. So the big story that we are following right now, the thick, dangerous smoke that you've been hearing about that's forcing millions of Americans to shelter in place.
Canada's wildfire crisis has become America's health hazard.
Very, very scary, just walking down the street and feeling like I'm going to have an asthma attack.
It feels like I'm at a campfire that I don't want to be at, and there's no s'mores.
Events canceled, flights grounded, and there's even more smoke on the way. The prime suspect in the disappearance of Alabama teenager Natalie Holloway is on his way here to the United States. While Joran Vandersloot is being extradited from Peru, and what comes next? Plus, the Biden administration announcing new protections for LGBTQ plus Americans as the White House prepares to host the biggest Pride event in its history. Scripps News Live begins right now.
Tens of millions of Americans are under air quality alerts right now as plumes of thick smoke sweep south from Canada and force people here in the United States to shelter in place. Welcome to Scripps News Live. Thank you so much for spending a part of your Thursday with us. Great to see you today. I'm Veronica Cruz. So states from Michigan to Maryland are being smothered right now beneath a thick layer of hazardous smoke. Take a look at this. City and state officials canceling public events, handing out face masks, other protective gear, and then warning people not to go outdoors right now. And there is no relief in sight. In fact, the air quality is expected to get worse overnight in Cleveland. And by tomorrow morning, plumes of smoke will hit Washington, D.C. and Pittsburgh.
We're recommending that people cancel their outdoor activities. We know that some of the baseball games have been canceled. Outdoor activities from professional sports are canceled. And just plan your exercise even around this. You don't need to go out and run tonight. You don't need to go out and take a walk. You don't need to push the baby in the stroller. This is not a safe time to do that. I want to reiterate that.
And like she was just saying, that heavy smoke is making conditions outside hazardous, and it's making a mess of air travel as well. The FAA placing a temporary pause on flights bound for LaGuardia in New York, as well as in Newark Liberty International Airport as well. An early morning pause placed on Baltimore-Washington International Airport lifted just after 10 a.m. this morning. Straight ahead this hour, I'm going to be speaking one-on-one with the director of New York's statewide weather network about the health threat that this wildfire smoke is posing and how it compares to other pollutants. We're going to be asking him if we can expect more of these extreme weather events as climate change continues to get worse. That is straight ahead this hour at 12:40 p.m. Eastern. In the meantime, we're following another major story. The Supreme Court siding with black voters in a closely watched challenge to Alabama's newly redrawn congressional districts. The court ruling 5-4 to order Alabama to create a new district with a majority black population. Scripps News Deputy Political Director Joe St. George live for us in Washington right now with the latest on this. Joe, what can you tell us about this decision?
Well, first and foremost, for those that watch the Supreme Court, follow the Supreme Court, how many stories from journalists like me, like you, Veronica, in recent years have been about a conservative opinion being issued? This is the exact opposite of that. This is the Supreme Court in a 5-4 ruling siding with progressives, siding with liberals in Alabama and around the country who believed that the way Alabama drew its congressional districts was simply unfair. You said it at the top there, around 27% of the electorate, the voting population in Alabama, are black voters. But only one of the 7 congressional districts, as it's drawn right now, is majority black. That was an issue for some. That's why this battle went all the way to the Supreme Court. And after years of scaling back the Voting Rights Act, Chief Justice John Roberts with the bombshell opinion just after 10 a.m. Eastern time this morning saying, no, the Voting Rights Act in this case still very much applies. Lawmakers in Alabama need to go back to the drawing board. He was joined in that decision with Associate Justice Brett Kavanaugh, another on paper conservative leading justice. justice. This has big implications. Yes, in Alabama, if you're watching us in Montgomery today, this means there's going to be a lot of debate over what the new map looks like. But if you're watching us, streaming along with us in other parts of the country, this means that state lawmakers in your state are still going to have to factor in race when it comes to redistricting. Gerrymandering typically happens every 10 years. And there are some big political ramifications to all of this, Veronica, as well. And that is that Alabama could very well be sending a Democrat to the House, another Democrat to Congress in the near future, impacting the balance of power in the House of Representatives, something to watch in the years to come. We do have a statement which we can share with you from some of the attorneys that represented the plaintiffs in this case, the ones who were really fighting for the Supreme Court to step up here. In a ruling, the Supreme Court made the right decision today. This is coming from Abakana, a partner with the Elias Law Group. They were involved in this decision. The Supreme Court made the right decision today, affirming the district court's ruling in accordance with decades of established precedent. Alabama's current congressional map systematically dilutes the voting power of Black Alabama. So a surprise from the Supreme Court today. As you guys know, a lot of our Scripps News viewers know, June is oftentimes when the most consequential opinions come down from the Supreme Court. And we are still waiting opinions and later this month on things like student loan forgiveness, affirmative action, race in college admissions. We'll be following it along with all of you and bringing it to you when they come down. But Veronica, just stunning development, big news out of the Supreme Court this morning.
It sure is a big surprise, and we're going to, of course, be watching all of those Supreme Court decisions closely. Joe St. George reporting live for us from Washington. Joe, always appreciate it. Thank you so much. Happening now, President Biden meeting with UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak at the White House. Sunak arriving in Washington early this morning and spending time at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. Now, according to the Biden administration, support for the war in Ukraine will factor heavily into today's meeting. They'll also take a look at ways to bolster cooperation on economic and climate matters. Scripps News correspondent Haley Bull is at the White House and has the details.
Good afternoon, Veronica. President Biden is meeting with UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak during his working visit to Washington as the two countries work to deepen their relationship, expected to focus on defense and economic ties in particular. While it's Sunak's first trip to Washington as Prime Minister, it's certainly not the first time these leaders have met in recent months. This will be their fourth meeting. Ukraine is expected to be top of mind during the meeting. Both countries have been staunch supporters for Ukraine's defense. The UK more recently committed to giving Ukraine long-range missiles, have helped with training Ukrainians, and committed to help train Ukrainian pilots. It comes as Ukraine accuses Russia of destroying a dam this week, leading to mass flooding and environmental concerns. Amid speculation about Ukraine's counteroffensive, and as allies look at long-term support for the country, most recently with F-16s. The economy is another focus, especially for the Prime Minister, who is looking for greater economic cooperation like the country's defense partnership. Sunak has a focus on economic security. The Prime Minister's office says Sunak will push for actions to protect against economic threats and strengthen supply chains. He'll also tout investments in the UK by U.S. companies. U.S. officials have previously said they weren't in active discussions about a free trade agreement, but looked forward to deepening the economic conversation. Wednesday, Sunak also met with congressional leaders where they discussed growing economies. Listen.
Our two nations have such long history and such great combination of not just our beliefs and our freedoms, but our economics. And I want to find every way we can to continue to build on all of those, because I think when our bond is stronger, the world is safer and democracy grows further.
What we need to do now is figure out how do we make sure that that relationship is strong to deal with the challenges of the future. I know that's what we're going to be talking about, but particularly strengthening our economies.
The UK also considers itself a leader on AI. The UK is planning a global summit on AI safety. It's a topic the White House has also focused on as it looks to balance the risks with opportunities. The Prime Minister's office says the two leaders will take a coordinated approach to emerging technology, and Sunak will look to underscore development of an international framework. Other topics expected to be talked about are clean energy and the Good Friday Agreement. This continues a string of diplomacy efforts by President Biden. Recently, he met with Denmark's Prime Minister earlier this week and is also expected to meet with NATO's Secretary General next week. We'll certainly be following the developments when the two leaders today give a press conference this afternoon. Veronica?
All right, Haley, thank you so much for that report there. Now, as expected, President Biden has vetoed legislation that would cancel his plan to forgive student debt. The president said the relief is critical to millions of Americans. The plan would forgive up to $20,000 in federal student debt for people who are making less than $125,000 a year. And we're still awaiting a U.S. Supreme Court ruling on a legal challenge to eliminate the program. And that decision could come this summer. In the meantime, special counsel Jack Smith's investigation of former President Trump has subpoenaed Steve Bannon. The former White House official would presumably be asked about the January 6th insurrection and the efforts to overturn the 2020 election. In Florida, a separate grand jury investigating whether Trump mishandled classified documents heard from another witness yesterday. And that's led to speculation any charges would be filed in Florida and not in Washington, D.C. The House Oversight Committee has canceled a vote today to find FBI Director Christopher Wray in contempt of Congress. Republican Chairman James Comer of Kentucky withdrew the resolution after the FBI offered the committee a redacted version of a confidential document alleging a bribery scheme between the president and a foreign national. Now, the Associated Press is saying that's according to an anonymous source who was not authorized to discuss this matter publicly. Televangelist and one-time Republican presidential candidate Pat Robertson has died. The Christian Broadcasting Network founder has been credited with making religious faith a central tenet of Republican politics and helped to influence policy through his Christian coalition. His son Gordon succeeded him as host of the 700 Club in 2021, though Pat Robertson continued to make appearances on the show until his death at the age of 93. Still to come on Scripps News Live, the Florida woman accused of shooting and killing a young mother through her front door will be facing a judge today. And financial disclosures from most of the Supreme Court justices are now public, with two notable exceptions. We're going to tell you about that. Also, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy facing a mutiny from members of his own party. How the Freedom Caucus is now stalling congressional business as a protest. That's next.
Hi, I'm Kirk Kaiser, and did you know the average funeral costs around $10,000? And if you don't have enough insurance to cover funeral costs, credit card debt, and other expenses, your family is going to get stuck with the bill. Don't let that happen. Call right now. And if you're over 50, you can get up to $30,000 in affordable life insurance, and your acceptance is guaranteed. That's right. If you're over 50, you can't be turned down for this insurance, regardless of your health. Plus, there's no medical exam and no health questions. Your rate will never go up. Your coverage will never go down. And rates start as low as $5 a week. Your coverage begins as soon as your application is received. Don't wait until it's too late.
Just call 800-760-7793.
Coverage is guaranteed regardless of your health and cannot be canceled without your approval. Don't leave your family with a huge bill for your funeral. With one fast and easy call, get up to $30,000 in affordable life insurance to help cover funeral expenses and credit card debt, and maybe even leave something for your kids and your grandkids. Remember, if you're over 50, you can't be turned down, regardless of your health. There's no medical exam and no health questions. Best of all, your rates start as low as $5 a week, and your rate will never increase. Nothing is more important than family. So don't leave them with a lot of bills to pay when you're gone. Don't leave your family with a lot of bills to pay for your funeral. Call right now. Acceptance is guaranteed. Call right now.
Call now. Call 800-760-7793. That's 800-760-7793.
Curious about trick plays and if
local hero, national champ, now he's home and expected to save freedom. Hey guys, am I dreaming or can we actually win this thing?
Sure, you should teach him to ride a bike. Then use Greenlight and teach him how to invest in bikes. Teach him to be smart about money and he'll go far.
Super far. Oh, hey, Mom.
Navigate the world of money together. Invest in your best investment. Greenlight.
There's a better way to begin your mornings.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Morning Rush. Thanks so much for being with us.
Context and conversation.
There's a new study that might make you feel a little bit better. Okay. So listen to this.
On the stories that will shape each day.
Here with us now is meteorologist Scott Withers. You got just wave after wave after wave.
So you can get on with yours.
Make sure you stay with us as we monitor this developing story.
Morning Rush. Weekday mornings starting at 7, 6 Central. Only on Scripps News.
Fresh off the weeks of debate over a deal to raise the debt ceiling, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is facing a new political challenge. This one is coming from members of his own party. The rank and file in the Freedom Caucus stalling congressional business right now. They're even threatening to have Speaker McCarthy removed as a means of protesting the deal McCarthy cut with President Biden to keep the government from defaulting on its debt. Let's get you right out to Scripps News national political correspondent Kevin Sriley, who's live in Washington for us. Kevin, what can you tell us about the growing tensions in the Republican Party right now? What is it looking like for Speaker McCarthy?
Veronica, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy thought that he was going to be able to squash the mutiny in the ranks, but now it's erupted in the last 36 hours on the House floor as 11 conservative hardliners in the Freedom Caucus have come out to stall and choke the political calendar on the House floor. Why they're doing it? They want to get Speaker McCarthy's attention. They want to pull him back to the right after they argue he went too far to the left in his bipartisan negotiations with President Biden over the debt ceiling. Now, over the last several weeks, sources have told me, Veronica, that they are considering, the Freedom Caucus is considering, at least a handful of them, filing a motion to vacate. Now, Speaker McCarthy's political orbit went into overdrive once those reports surfaced and tried to truthfully squash all of those conversations from happening. But I'm told that the conservative Freedom Caucus feels that he went too far in trying to quell that disdain. And as a result of that, it's now erupted into this chokehold over the calendar on the House of Representatives floor. While they're not on the floor, there are private conversations being had virtually around the clock as Speaker McCarthy tries to win back some of the approval so they can free up from this political hurdle. But take a listen to what he said just last night about just the impact that this is having on his speakership. Here he is.
It's okay if we have some disruptions, because if the disruptions turn out to save the hardworking taxpayer more money, that we eliminate some more wasteful Washington spending, I've got a challenge over there on the Senate side with even Senate Republicans who now just want to blow up the deal to spend more money. So I've got to push on all sides. I mean, sometimes I feel like Goldilocks, but we're going to get right to the middle.
So Veronica, right there, you heard it. He's stuck in the middle. He feels like Goldilocks.
I don't know that that's anything new, but, you know, thank you so much for keeping an eye on it for us. Something else I know that you've been keeping an eye on is that bad air, all of the pollution that's just hanging over the Northeast right now. And I know that Washington is a very busy place, Kevin, and obviously a lot of political business needs to get done. Is it having an impact at all in terms of, you know, people's calendars?
Well, in terms of the politics of this, President Biden met with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau via telephone in the last 12 hours or so, and they discussed how the U.S. is helping Canada. What has emerged, Veronica, that I think will surprise millions of Americans is that Canada itself does not have a national fire service. So think about that. All of their efforts to control fires are done through the various jurisdictions in their country. In contrast, the United States, for example, has FEMA, and under FEMA, there is a federal agency that consults and works with all of the local states and governments, whatnot, as it relates to fire. There's a national service to look at fires and wildfires in the U.S. That doesn't exist in Canada. Case in point, 600 U.S. firefighters have had to travel to Canada in order to assist with this. And, you know, you and I have gone back and forth on this. The East Coast is not used to this. New York City's not used to this. Baltimore's not used to this. Philly, certainly not Washington, D.C. I know you've had experiences with it, but this caught everybody off guard. And, you know, these firefighters are the real heroes. These American firefighters are the real heroes who are literally running toward the fire. And it's act of heroism, to be blunt.
No, you're right about that. And I did spend 7 years as one of the main anchors in San Francisco, and we haven't even hit fire season yet. But this was every single fire season. We would see this thick blanket of smoke just hovering over the Bay Area, and now it's here on the East Coast coming down from Canada. So it is startling. It just says so much about where we are with climate change right now. Kevin Cirilli reporting live for us from Washington. Kevin, thank you so much for all of it. Good to see you. Thanks. So federal financial disclosures filed by Supreme Court justices are now being made public, and these annual disclosures are of particular interest this year because the Supreme Court's ethical guidelines, as well as the finances of some of the court's members, have been under intense scrutiny. Wednesday's filings show Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson received a $1,200 congratulatory floral display from Oprah Winfrey. She also reported more than $6,800 in designer clothing for a Vogue photo shoot on the first black woman on the nation's highest court. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, in the meantime, said that she received nearly $150,000 in royalties for 2 children's books. Anyone wanting to see Justice Clarence Thomas's financial filings, they're going to have to wait. He and Justice Samuel Alito have both asked for extensions, which could be for as long as 90 days. Justice Thomas has come under recent scrutiny for not disclosing gifts there, including vacations from a wealthy Republican donor. Critics have used the situation to demand ethics reform for the Supreme Court. And then going more in depth right here, ProPublica has reported Justice Thomas has accepted trips from mega donor Harlan Crow for 2 decades. ProPublica is saying that Crow has provided a jet, a 162-foot yacht, and access to luxury locations around the world. Justice Thomas didn't include the trips on any financial disclosures. Leslie Tenzer is a professor of law at Pace University in New York City, and Morning Rush spoke with her about the Supreme Court financial disclosures and the growing controversy generated by Justice Thomas and Harlan Crow.
There's a ethics law that was created in response to the Watergate hearings that require these justices to do their reporting. They all reported on Wednesday, yesterday. And the question, as you said, is why is it that they deferred? I suspect that the ProPublica reporting had some reason to do with it, right? Justice Thomas probably had to go back and refigure how to make sure that he does this in the right way. But the bigger issue is, why isn't somebody who's one of 9 people, or actually 2 out of 9 people who are responsible for the rule of law in our country, obeying it in a timely manner?
So the justices don't have a code of ethics to abide by. In fact, all 9 justices pushed back on a attempt at oversight. So I guess what is the possible repercussions for violating any disclosure rules?
Well, so the rule that that requires them to disclose their information is a rule that's set by Congress, right? It's the 1978 Ethics in Government Act. If a justice violates that act, then arguably they violated a statute. If we want to take the long game, and I'm not suggesting this will happen, but this could happen, if the justices don't want to abide by this act, they can challenge the act, which means that they take the act to court, and somebody has to decide the constitutionality of the act. Who ultimately does that? The Supreme Court of the United States. Interestingly, the code of conduct that people are advocating for would be something that the court would create itself to rule itself, and it wouldn't have the teeth of a federal statute. So I don't think it would have the same enforcement value.
And just to be clear, there were some revised ethics rules adopted back in March that require the justices and all federal judges in our country to provide a fuller public accounting of the free trips and other gifts they accept. The changes make clear, this is according to the Washington Post, judges must report any travel by a private jet, and also clarified which gifts can be counted as personal hospitality, which was the phrase that Justice Thomas used in talking about what he got, many luxury trips he got financed by Harlan Crow. It was interesting, though. We did learn little tidbits about the justices as kind of evidence that the conversation's having an effect, just because it's interesting to know. Like Justice Kagan disclosed she makes income because she owns owns a parking space in D.C. Justice Sotomayor said she extended a subsidized trip to Scotland for her own money because she decided to turn part of the trip into a vacation. So in other words, you are seeing a court that is a little more aware that people are watching their money a little more closely. Do you think, are you at all encouraged by that, or is this just kind of a weak Band-Aid on it all?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the latter. I think it's a weak Band-Aid. I mean, I think it's actually interesting because, you know, we have kind of this, we revere the people who are on the Supreme Court of the United States, and to hear that someone owns a parking space makes them a little more human, right? It humanizes them a little bit. But I suspect, you know, they've always reported these kind of things. So probably Justice Sotomayor got flowers when she was appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States. I don't think that they're reporting any more specifically. I think that the media is reporting about it more specifically, probably because of the ProPublica report and the kind of fine line in which Justice Thomas, in my opinion, walks.
And real quick before I let you go, Justice Thomas obviously is at the center of this storm, and I'm just wondering from your standpoint, which you find more troubling, or not troubling at all? The Harlan Crow gifts, the vacations, the tuition paid for a relative, selling property, including his mother's home, to Mr. Crow, or the fact that we now know how extensively his wife, Ginny, a conservative activist, was involved behind the scenes in challenging the 2020 election, and that Justice Thomas still rules on cases related to that election. Which do you think is more problematic for the country and for Thomas himself?
For the country, I think it's all problematic. I don't think one's any more problematic than the other. You know, our country is only as good as we abide by the rule of law by the Supreme Court of the United States, right? So when the Supreme Court of the United States makes a ruling, you know, abrogating abortion rights, everyone follows it because this is the Supreme Court, right? So now you have someone on the Supreme Court who may be influenced in making their decisions that affect all of us. So if a Supreme Court justice is influenced, regardless of whether it's his wife or his buddy, it's still problematic. So I find it all problematic, to be honest.
Ahead on Scripps News Live, a convicted killer and the prime suspect in Alabama teenager Natalie Holloway's disappearance is now in FBI custody and is being extradited to the United States. Plus, the Florida woman arrested for shooting and killing her neighbor in a dispute will face a judge today. We'll have the details for you after a quick break.
Do you spend hours maintaining your gutters? Save that time with LeafGuard's maintenance-free system. Call 1-833-2-GUTTERS. Mesh filters sit on top of your gutters, building up debris and eventually clogging. Then they need to be cleaned too. Honestly, your home should have been built with LeafGuard gutters. LeafGuard's wraparound hood deflects debris and keeps water away from your home. The one-piece seamless system is strong, 20% thicker than average, and built to last. Plus, LeafGuard is guaranteed to never clog for as long as you own your home. Right now, get a complete LeafGuard system for only $99 down, $99 a month, and $99 installation. You'll also receive a $100 Visa gift card with a free gutter inspection and in-home estimate. Damage from clogged gutters can cost you thousands. Never worry about clogged gutters again. Don't wait, you've still got time. Call 1-833-2-GUTTERS today. That's 1-833-2-GUTTERS.
Create an amazing website with Fiverr. You'll need your web developer, UX writer, and Amy, a Fiverr freelance graphic designer with dozens of 5-star reviews who will join your team from her favorite coffee shop. Don't forget to tip. Expand your team with a Fiverr freelancer.
Shopping for Father's Day is hard.
Actually, it's easy.
You never know what to get him.
Just give me steak.
It has to be perfect.
Yep. Dads want steak.
Right now, Omaha Steaks is offering Dad's favorite gift package that includes 4 of our exquisite bacon-wrapped filet mignons, 4 air-chilled boneless chicken breasts, boneless pork chops, Jumbo Frank's dessert, and more. All for just $99.99. Save 61%. Order today at omahasteaks.com/TV and you'll get 8 burgers free.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
I don't get paid until next week.
I got you. I'm Dave, and I can spot you up to $500 of your future money instantly.
Up to $500 instantly? What else is in my future?
A new couch. Only!
Get up to $500 instantly with Dave.
Municipal bonds don't usually get the media coverage the stock market does. In fact, most people don't find them all that exciting. But if you're looking for the potential for consistent income that's federally tax-free, now is an excellent time to consider municipal bonds from Henyon & Walsh. If you have at least $10,000 to invest, call and talk with one of our bond specialists at 1-800-465-8465. We'll send you our exclusive bond guide, free, with details about how bonds can be an important part of your portfolio. Henyon & Walsh has specialized in fixed income and growth solutions for 30 years and offers high-quality municipal bonds from across the country. They provide the potential for regular income, are federally tax-free, and have historically low risk. Call today to request your free bond guide, 1-800-465-8465. That's 1-800-465-8465.
Hey there, welcome back to Scripps News Live. Great to see you on this Thursday. I'm Veronica Cruz. It's half past the hour. Let's get up to speed on the biggest stories that we're tracking for you right now. U.S. cities, especially in the Northeast, dealing with yet another day of smoke-filled air, all thanks to Canadian wildfires. The haze has been reducing visibility and irritating people's throats and eyes. Tens of millions of people in the eastern U.S. are under air quality alerts right now.
Very, very scary, just walking down the street and feeling like I'm going to have an asthma attack. That's how bad the air quality is.
It feels like I'm at a campfire that I don't want to be at, and there's no s'mores.
New York saw its worst air quality in 20 years yesterday. The New York Yankees canceled their game last night, and they hope to play 2 games today, even though New Yorkers are urged to stay indoors. The Washington Nationals also canceled their game due to the bad air quality. The U.S. Supreme Court giving a victory to black voters in Alabama. Justices ordered the creation of a 2nd congressional district, a majority of black voters. Chief Justice John Roberts and conservative Justice Brett Kavanaugh agreeing with liberal justices, saying the way districts were drawn likely violated the Voting Rights Act. And Special Counsel Jack Smith wants to hear from former White House advisor Steve Bannon. He's issued Bannon a subpoena for testimony about the January 6th insurrection and efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Developing now, a Florida woman accused of shooting and killing a young mother is expected to make her first court appearance today. 58-year-old Susan Lawrence facing charges for fatally shooting A.J. Owens through a closed door on Friday. Owens' mother says her 9-year-old son was standing next to her. According to a police report, the shooting happened after Owens confronted Lawrence about throwing skates at her children. Lawrence claims that she was acting in self-defense. Getting it out of Virginia in a high school graduation ceremony that turned deadly in Richmond. Authorities releasing new details in their investigation. They say the suspect, 19-year-old Amari Pollard, targeted a classmate that he'd been feuding with for more than a year. 18-year-old Sean Jackson and his father, Lorenzo Smith, were killed on Tuesday. Smith served in the Army. 5 other people were wounded. Pollard is facing 2 counts of second-degree murder. And the prime suspect in the disappearance of Natalie Holloway is now heading to the U.S. Jorn Vandersloot being extradited to face extortion and wire fraud charges in connection to Holloway's disappearance. Earlier this morning, authorities escorted him out of prison in Peru and handed him over to FBI agents. Vandersloot has been serving a 28-year sentence in a Peruvian prison for killing another woman back in 2012. Holloway was 18 years old when she disappeared in 2005. She was last seen leaving a nightclub in Aruba with Vandersloot and 2 others. Court TV's Kelly Craft has more now on what Vandersloot can expect once he lands on U.S. soil.
Jorn Vandersloot is expected to arrive here in Birmingham, Alabama today. He is being extradited from Peru after losing his battle to fight extradition to face charges of wire fraud and extortion in connection with the Natalie Holloway case. Once he does arrive, he will be held at the federal detention facility until he has an initial court appearance at the federal courthouse behind me. Now, keep in mind, the charges that he is being brought here to face, these all stem back to a 2010 grand jury indictment. Once he was indicted, the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama issued a statement. He had a lot of things to say about this. In that statement, he said, quote, "Because of the agent's dedicated efforts, we are able to bring charges against someone who sought profit in a mother's grief. Vandersloot tried to fight his extradition to the United States to face these charges, but a Peruvian judge denied his attempt to halt the extradition. Vandersloot's attorney claimed Vandersloot was not notified by Peruvian officials of the temporary extradition process going on against him. His attorney called this a serious constitutional violation. The judge disagreed. According to a treaty between the United States and Peru, Urin can be extradited for 1 year to face legal proceedings, and his time here can be extended for a second year if there is a delay. Peru agreed to this extradition under the condition Vandersloot be returned to Peru once any trial concludes here in the United States. According to a 2010 U.S. federal indictment, Urin Vandersloot contacted the Holloway family by email. Vandersloot offered to take the Holloway family attorney, John Kelly, to the location of Natalie's body for an initial payment of $25,000. And upon recovery of the body, Vandersloot would be paid an additional $225,000. Holloway's mother wired $15,000 to a bank account Vandersloot held in the Netherlands, and through her attorney, gave him another $10,000 in person. Vandersloot had claimed Holloway was buried at a particular home, but the contractor for that home said the home was not even under construction when Natalie disappeared. Vandersloot later admitted he made up the entire story. If convicted of both the wire fraud and the extortion charges, Vandersloot could face up to 40 years behind bars in the United States. Reporting from Birmingham, Alabama, I'm Kelly Craft. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Kelly Craft reporting there. Kelly, thank you. Coming up next on Scripps News Live, much of the northeastern U.S. is struggling right now beneath a layer of thick toxic smoke. Scripps News meteorologist Scott Withers is in Delaware right now to explain when those skies could clear and precautions that you should take until they do.
I'm meteorologist Scott Withers in Wilmington, Delaware. Up and down the East Coast, tens of millions of people dealing with very unhealthy or dangerous air quality issues. I'll have the latest on the wildfire smoke plume and which states are issuing air quality alerts. All of that coming up right now on Scripps News Live.
Attention anyone new to Medicare, moving or losing coverage for any reason. You may qualify for a Medicare special enrollment period. Call now to see if you're eligible to enroll in a Medicare Part C plan with extra benefits. Did you know Medicare Part C is commonly called Medicare Advantage? If you qualify for an SEP, call now because there may be plans with extra benefits available that are not covered under Medicare Parts A and B. There are people who qualify for special enrollment but don't have a Medicare Advantage Part C plan, which covers everything at Part A and Part B, plus extra benefits not covered by original Medicare. Here's the good news. If you qualify, you can call now. We will check to see if there is a Medicare Advantage Part C plan available in your area with additional benefits. Call now to speak with a licensed insurance agent to see if you are eligible to enroll in a 2023 Medicare Advantage plan with extra benefits like dental coverage or savings on prescription medications. You don't get these extra benefits automatically, so call now for your free 2023 no-obligation Medicare benefits review. Just call 800-543-6120. 800-543-6120. Attention anyone new to Medicare, moving or losing coverage for any reason. You may qualify for a Medicare special enrollment period. Call now to see if you're eligible to enroll in a Medicare Part C plan with extra benefits. Did you know Medicare Part C is commonly called Medicare Advantage? If you qualify for an SEP, call now because there may be plans with extra benefits available that are not covered under Medicare Parts A and B. There are people who qualify for special enrollment but don't have a Medicare Advantage Part C plan, which covers everything at Part A and Part B, plus extra benefits not covered by original Medicare. Here's the good news. If you qualify, you can call now. We will check to see if there is a Medicare Advantage Part C plan available in your area with additional benefits. Call now to speak with a licensed insurance agent to see if you are eligible to enroll in a 2023 Medicare Advantage plan with extra benefits like dental coverage or savings on prescription medications. You don't get these extra benefits automatically, so call now for your free 2023 no-obligation Medicare benefits review. Just call 800-543-6120. 800-543-6120.
Attention all business owners. If you had W-2 employees during the COVID-19 pandemic, you may be entitled to up to $26,000 per employee with the Employee Retention Tax Credit. The deadline to file your claims is approaching. Call now to see if your business qualifies. This approved payroll tax refund program from the U.S. Treasury Department is set up to reward business owners who kept employees on payroll during the pandemic. There is no limit on the amount of funding. Plus, you can get access to your cash in a matter of weeks. You want a trusted partner who understands the IRS guidelines. ERC experts are standing by to help your business claim your COVID refund. You may be entitled to up to $26,000 per employee. This quick and easy call can get your business the money it deserves. Don't miss the deadline to file your claims. Just call 800-360-1106. That's 800-360-1106.
When Lila was ready to sell her ring, she sent it to Worthy, where they took care of everything and auctioned it on her terms. Then, Worthy sent Lila her money. Get what you're worth at worthy.com.
Digging deeper into the headlines.
We have some big stories to get to tonight.
Shedding light on groundbreaking investigations and ending your night with something new.
Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Christian Bryant.
Scripps News Tonight, live tonight, starting at 8/7 Central.
And a quick reminder, we'd like to hear from you. You can give us a call on our Scripps News viewer hotline toll-free. That number on your screen is 1-833-4-SCRIPPS. You can share your comments and your story ideas. Heavy smoke from Canadian wildfires continues to create apocalyptic images that have been pouring out of the northeastern U.S. right now. Take a look at this. This time-lapse video from New York shows the smoke moving in yesterday and then slowly swallowing up the city's iconic skyline. You could barely see it there. The smoke is much more than an inconvenience, though. It is a health hazard, which is why New York City Mayor Eric Adams went door to door in some of the city's public housing communities last night to warn people of the danger, and also wanted to hand out face masks. Now, in the meantime, the smoke has been creating backups at some of America's busiest airports. Just after 9 a.m. Eastern, the FAA briefly announced a ground stop at Philadelphia International Airport, stopping inbound flights from the Mid-Atlantic, Ohio, and the Northeast due to all of that poor visibility. Service resumed about an hour later. And then in Baltimore issuing a code red air quality alert, asking people there to limit their time outdoors. Meteorologists tracked another thick plume of smoke that drifted into the city this morning. Air monitors in central Maryland have been sending back readings hovering near the hazardous category, which is the highest threat level. And what is particularly worrisome about this smoke is that it's going to stick around through at least the end of the week, which means that it could be days before the skies clear and people can finally breathe clean air again. Scripps News meteorologist Scott Withers is in Delaware this afternoon, and he's been reporting on the smoke threat and how cities there are trying to keep people safe.
Veronica, this smoke plume is really on the move, basically down I-95. The weather patterns pushing it. Right now, some of the worst is in York, Pennsylvania, and the state capital of Pennsylvania, Harrisburg. But here in Wilmington, we've seen areas today that were in the dangerous. Now, that's kind of dropped back down to the very unhealthy. Not a lot better. But from here down through Baltimore into the nation's capital, we are going to see significant air quality alerts throughout the day.
The skies up and down the East Coast turning an eerie orange again. New York's Manhattan skyline barely visible from New Jersey. The Brooklyn Bridge disappearing into the haze. And outside of Philadelphia, I could barely see the ground just seconds before my flight lands. Record-setting levels of smoke filling the air, streaming down across the border from hundreds of wildfires burning in Canada. The worst start to the country's wildfire season ever. Almost 9 million acres already scorched.
These levels are at least 10 times higher than what health guidelines mark as the healthy levels for exposure for particulate matter.
Not just hard to see in, but hard to breathe in.
This is not my real voice. My nasal passages are all swollen up because of this.
Across the region, kids' athletics, outdoor concerts, and sporting events all canceled. For a second day, New York City topping the list of the world's worst air quality, hitting the very unhealthy mark.
The normal air quality index, safe, normal, is 50. Parts of our state have seen a level of over 400 in the last 24 hours. And that is a dangerous situation.
People still flocking to Times Square, though, despite pleas from emergency officials to stay inside and wear pandemic-era N95 masks if you do have to go outdoors. Canadian officials reporting hundreds of fires burning out of control. U.S. sending firefighters to help, but signs pointing to climate change fueling those fires.
Hotter temperatures, drier conditions, worsening droughts, less precipitation, all of those things which are symptoms of climate change are happening, and those things do worsen wildfires.
Which will keep sending smoke south until the weather patterns change.
the weather patterns are starting to change, and that's what's actually moving this smoke plume. You can see here on the map, we've got that boundary, the frontal boundary there dropping down to the south. We've also got a low pressure system spinning, and that's channeling this smoke plume now down basically I-95, the worst of it moving through where I'm at here in Wilmington, Delaware, down through Baltimore and into Washington, D.C. That's where we have our severe weather alerts. You can see them on the map, all of the gray. That's stretching from New England back to the Great Lakes, all the way down to the Carolinas. That's what all of the states that have issued those air quality alerts for today. The green, we do have some thunderstorms across the country, but those are not as significant as the smoke. Veronica, tomorrow morning, we're going to have more problems to specific cities. Overnight tonight, the smoke is going to be moving through the Cleveland, Ohio area. Early tomorrow morning, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and also the southern suburbs of Washington, D.C. They are going to have the worst of this smoke. Veronica?
Now, in addition to staying inside to avoid all the smoke, experts advise keeping your indoor air clean. The way to do that is to keep the windows and fireplaces closed to make sure any HEPA air filters or air conditioners are set to recirculate indoor air, and avoid doing things that add more particles to indoor air, like maybe smoking or burning candles or even frying food. Joining us now live is Christopher D. Thorncroft. He's the director of Atmospheric Sciences Research Center at the University of Albany. Christopher, thank you so much for your time today. Now, we're watching all of those air quality alerts come in. We know that this is the worst air quality that we've seen on the East Coast for decades now. And we know that this is all caused by these wildfires burning in Canada right now. How does the pollution that we're seeing, all that pollution that is hanging over the East Coast, how does it compare to maybe something like the pollution that's created by automobile exhaust?
Good afternoon. Happy to be here. The pollution that we're seeing here is 10, maybe 20 or 30 times as intense that you'd get from normal car exhaust. So it really is quite extreme.
I know that people are looking at this, and a lot of people are quite worried. We know that climate change has been a factor in the severity of what we're seeing right now and the severity of these wildfires that are burning in Canada. What is going on? Are we going to see more fires with the same type of impact?
But generally, if there's fuel to burn, climate change will lead to obviously warming up of the planet and the atmosphere. So we expect wildfires to become more frequent globally. Here we're used to seeing the wildfires further west of us, and we get smoke from those events observed. And clearly, Canada is causing our problem today. So we should be ready and prepared to see these kind of events more frequently due to climate change.
And the effects of this are expected to be visible on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean as well. We know that things are not great for folks in the Northeast. We know that things are not great for people who are in New York right now. But I want to talk about the spread, because it seems as though the smoke has spread quite far. These are fires that are burning to the north of us in Canada. Is it unusual for wildfire smoke to travel this far?
Well, first of all, it's very unusual to get such an intense intensity in smoke. This is a record-breaking event for the Northeast, and obviously we're experiencing it because we've had quite sustained northerly straight airflow from north to south, pushing all that smoke down towards us. I'm in Albany, and we might get some respite a little bit today because the wind direction is changing. So we're at the mercy of the weather system in terms of where the smoke will go. But while the fires are still burning, the smoke is going to go somewhere, and people are going to get affected.
You know, to your point, I used to live on the West Coast in the Bay Area, and we used to see this type of smoke in the Bay Area because of the wildfires that would burn in the area, whether it was Napa or wine country, if you will. And the smoke would really just hang over us. And the only way we could find respite would be to leave the city and to go to the mountains or somewhere else. I'm sure that that's probably what's on a lot of people's minds right now. But if they do need to go outside, what do they need to do in order to protect themselves? We've been speaking to our reporters all day, and they have these KN95s on their face as they're reporting. Are these masks helping at all?
Well, I think certainly New York State has provided recommendations that you wear these masks while you're outside. It's kind of the opposite of the pandemic, right? But certainly, if the public need to look at the concentrations, the air quality index, if it's extremely high, I would recommend that you don't go out unless you have to. Certainly wouldn't, if you're vulnerable, I certainly wouldn't you do exercise. And if you have to be out, I'm sure the mask is a good idea to limit the amount of pollutant that gets into your lungs.
I want to ask you about that pollutant that gets into your lungs. How dangerous is it? You were saying it is more dangerous than automobile exhaust. What is it doing when those particles sit in your lungs?
Well, anyone with a breathing problem is going to suffer more because of the air quality. And there's published work that indicates that through sustained exposure, there's these kind of pollutants, the frequency of, maybe surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, the frequency of heart attacks can go up. So anyone that is vulnerable already in terms of their health really should be careful about going out on these extremely bad pollutant days.
What is the indicator then? How do you know when it's actually safe to go outside again, to forget the mask? What are you looking for? Is it just simply that the air is now clear?
No, there are some websites here. We have the Department of Environmental Conservation. They have on their websites, they have constant monitoring of the air quality index. And we want it to drop to more moderate levels, 100 or 50 or something like that. And then people can start thinking about, behaving back to normal, as it were.
And Christopher, you were saying that normal is 100 or 50. What is the average of what we're seeing right now? How does it differ?
Well, it's New York City yesterday was up to 400. Albany this morning was 200. And so, it's dropping today during the day because the wind's changing direction. But these numbers can change with the weather, with the wind direction. So that's why it's pretty important to actually go onto those websites if you need to make important decisions about whether you go out or whether you're working. DEC is the place to go for New York in terms of getting that information.
My goodness, you were saying New York was 400 yesterday, and what would be average would be 50 or 100. That is quite a difference. And what are these websites that you're talking about? Where should folks be getting their information right now?
I think they should go to the Department of Environmental Conservation website where there'll be linkages to those, for New York, that is. And there's also some federal government websites that have similar information.
And I've spent some time in China, and it's not unusual for the air quality in China to be really bad to the point where you need to wear a mask to go outside. When you say that we're going to start to see this happen more and more in the United States, is that what we're looking at in terms of what we should expect in the future?
I think generally, at the moment, this event is comparable to what people in Beijing would experience, but we're probably not at the level of frequency of events that they have yet. It's likely to increase over the next decades. That's all. But this event is as intense as they see in Beijing.
Yeah, I remember getting off the plane, landing in Beijing and not being able to breathe at all because the air quality was just so bad. And everybody checks the AQI every single day before they go out. Right. So I'm hoping that we never experience anything like that here in the United States on a daily basis. Christopher D. Thorncroft of the University at Alabama. Christopher, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And coming up next on Scripps News Live, the Human Rights Campaign declaring a state of emergency for LGBTQ plus people in the U.S. amid a surge of new state laws targeting that community. Also, the Biden administration expanding protections for gay Americans at the federal level ahead of tonight's Pride event at the White House. We'll have the details next.
There's a reason big dental bills often come as a shock, because sometimes you don't realize what's not covered until you get the bill. That's why affordable dental insurance from Physicians Mutual is important. It can give you benefits that go beyond what you get from more limited coverage plans. Because no one likes a big dental bill, especially if you're retired or on a fixed income. For a free information kit, call or go online now. This isn't some discount plan or preventive-only coverage. This is real dental insurance that helps cover over 350 procedures, like cleanings, fillings, crowns, bridges, root canals, even dentures, at any dentist you want. Dental insurance from Physicians Mutual Insurance Company helps cover preventive care, basic work, and major procedures, with no deductibles and no annual maximum. For your free information kit with all the details, call now or visit sendinfokit.com.
Physicians Mutual, Physicians Mutual. How does Klein & Spector get among the most big verdicts and settlements of any law firm in the country? Because Klein & Spector is an award-winning team with 5 doctor lawyers, the most of any firm in the United States. And that's why the New York Times calls Klein & Spector a powerhouse law firm. So if a defective product, motor vehicle accident, or medical malpractice caused a catastrophic injury, call Klein & Spector.
Keep your dog safe anywhere with the world's smartest fence. Halo Collar is a virtual fence inside a collar. Easily create multiple fences in the app, no installation required. Teach them to keep away from danger and come back to safety. Safely give your dog a life off leash. Wherever you go, it's a whole new world for you and your dog. Learn more at halocollar.com.
If you're living with diabetes, this is the sound that could change your life.
Great news for people living with diabetes. Now you can wear a continuous glucose monitor and eliminate routine finger sticks. The days of repeated, painful finger sticks are over.
Call 800-719-8907.
If you use insulin daily to manage your condition, a continuous glucose monitor could help you control your diabetes and reduce or eliminate those painful finger sticks. If you have Medicare or private insurance, US Med can deliver a CGM system right to your door. And if you qualify, there may be little or no cost to you. Shipping is free and will even bill your insurer directly. Call now to get your continuous glucose monitoring system so you can take control of your diabetes and get back to enjoying life.
Call 800-719-8907. That's 800-719-8907.
The nation's largest LGBTQ advocacy group sounding the alarm about the current political climate. Human Rights Campaign has declared a state of emergency for the community. The group called the spike in legislation against LGBTQ plus people, quote, unprecedented and dangerous. It also released a guidebook to help people know their rights in hostile environments. In the meantime, the Biden administration is rolling out new initiatives to protect LGBTQ people, and it comes ahead of tonight's Pride Month event at the White House. Protections include mental health resources and efforts to counter book bans. President Biden is expected to tout these initiatives when thousands of people gather at the South Lawn for tonight's celebration. But officials may postpone the event depending on the air quality in Washington, D.C. tonight. So right now, President Biden is hosting UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak at the White House, and the leaders are expected to discuss support for the war in Ukraine, as well as ways to bolster cooperation in economic and climate matters. I'm Veronica Cruz. We're going to have a full report for you in the next hour of Scripps News Live. We'll be back after a quick break.
Attention all seniors. You can now get up to $50,000 for your funeral and other final expenses, including your credit card debt, with no medical exam, starting at less than $1 a day.
Oh, honey, your dad and I can't stop talking about this baby that's coming.
We've also been thinking a lot about our future, and no matter what, we want to make sure we aren't leaving you and your family with any of our debts.
Just last week, we read that the price of a funeral can be $8,000 or more.
Wow, Jeff and I definitely would not have the money to pay for that.
And that's just a funeral. But you don't have to worry. We called, and with one phone call, we were eligible for $50,000 for our funeral and final expenses.
Well, that's great, but don't you need to take a medical exam to qualify? You and Mom have some health issues.
No. There's no medical exam, and we were able to get coverage right over the phone.
And our rates can never be increased, our benefits can never be decreased, and our coverage can never be canceled.
I'm so glad you made that call.
Don't leave loved ones with your debt. Call 800-339-7996 now and see if you qualify for up to $50,000 for your funeral and other final expenses, starting at less than $1 a day. There's no medical exam, and you can be approved even if you have pre-existing health conditions. Your rates can never be increased, your benefits can never be decreased, and your coverage can never be canceled. There's no obligation. Call 800-339-7996 now. There's no paperwork, no no hidden fees, and no waiting periods. And you can start coverage right over the phone, starting at less than $1 a day. Call 800-339-7996. That's 800-339-7996. 800-339-7996.
There's a lot to watch on TV these days. Problem is, most streaming options are incredibly pricey, and you'll end up paying for the local channels you can get for free. Luckily, there's a solution. Sling is only $40 a month. And you get awesome stuff like sports, news, and today's hottest TV for half of what the other guys cost. If you already get free locals with an antenna, now you can easily add the channels you're missing with Sling. It's the TV you love for a price you'll love. Visit sling.com/antenna to learn more.
My little family is me, Aria, and Jade. Just the three of us girls. Here, this way. I never thought twice about feeding her kibble, but about 2 years ago, I realized she was overweight. She was always out of breath. That's when I decided to introduce the farmer's dog to her diet. It's just so fresh that she literally gets bubbles in her mouth. Now she's a lot more active. She's able to join us on our adventures, and we're all able to do things as a family.
Get started at betterforthem.com.
Wendy only met Margot 8 days ago while searching for freelance web developers on Fiverr. But the incredible website he delivered made him an invaluable member of the team. Expand your team with a Fiverr freelancer.
Do you have an idea for a story you would like to see or a comment on our coverage you want to share? We want to hear from you. Call our Scripps News viewer hotline at 833-4-SCRIPPS. That's 833-4-SCRIPPS.
Hey there, thank you so much for staying with us on this Thursday afternoon. Happy Thursday, or Friday Eve, as we like to call it. It's now 1 p.m. in the East and 10 a.m. out West, and I'm Veronica Cruz. Welcome back to Scripps News Live. Happening now, President Biden meeting with UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak at the White House. Sunak arrived in Washington early this morning and spent time at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. Now, according to the Biden administration, support for the war in Ukraine will factor heavily into the meeting, but they'll also look at ways to bolster cooperation on economic and climate matters. Scripps News correspondent Haley Bull is at the White House and has the details for us.
Good afternoon, Veronica. President Biden is meeting with UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak during his working visit to Washington as the two countries work to deepen their relationship, expected to focus on defense and economic ties in particular. While it's Sunak's first trip to Washington as Prime Minister, it's certainly not the first time these leaders have met in recent months. This will be their fourth meeting. Ukraine is expected to be top of mind during the meeting. Both countries have been staunch supporters for Ukraine's defense. The UK more recently committed to giving Ukraine long-range missiles, have helped with training Ukrainians, and committed to help train Ukrainian pilots. It comes as Ukraine accuses Russia of destroying a dam this week, leading to mass flooding and environmental concerns. Amid speculation about Ukraine's counteroffensive, and as allies look at long-term support for the country, most recently with F-16s. The economy is another focus, especially for the Prime Minister, who is looking for greater economic cooperation like the country's defense partnership. Sunak has a focus on economic security. The Prime Minister's office says Sunak will push for actions to protect against economic threats and strengthen supply chains. He'll also tout investments in the UK by U.S. companies. U.S. officials have previously said they weren't in active discussions about a free trade agreement, but looked forward to deepening the economic conversation.
As NATO allies, we're working together to help provide the collective defense of all of us, and we're going to further, I hope, we're going to discuss today plans to further strengthen our economic relationship. And the global economy is undergoing, I think, the greatest transformation that's occurred since the Industrial Revolution. And something you know a lot about, AI, is going to...
For the first time in over half a century, we face a war on the European continent. And as we've done before, the US and the UK have stood together to support Ukraine and stand up for the values of democracy.
The UK also considers itself a leader on AI. The UK is planning a global summit on AI safety. It's a topic the White House has also focused on as it looks to balance the risks with opportunities. The Prime Minister's office says the two leaders will take a coordinated approach to emerging technology, and Sunak will look to underscore development of an international framework. Other topics expected to be talked about are clean energy and the Good Friday Agreement. This continues a string of diplomacy efforts by President Biden recently. He met with Denmark's Prime Minister earlier this week and is also expected to meet with NATO's Secretary General next week. We'll certainly be following the developments when the two leaders today give a press conference this afternoon. Veronica?
All right, Haley, thank you for that. Overseas now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky toured the flooded Kherson region of Ukraine and urged the world to respond to humanitarian needs. Ukraine and Russia are blaming each other for the dam breach. Ukraine's largest river flooded an area more than 3 times the size of Washington, D.C. More than 60,000 people live in the Kherson region. Ukraine and Russia say 8 people have drowned, and Zelensky is saying more than 2,000 people have now been rescued. But both countries are accusing each other of shooting at rescuers. In the meantime, there is another danger to worry about: floating landmines. International correspondent Jason Bellini has the details.
Looks of relaxation, relief, even gratitude from some of Ukraine's most vulnerable residents. These dogs were rescued from rising floodwaters in the Kherson region, resulting from the collapse of a major dam nearby. Retrieved with loving pats and gentle embraces, their future looking much brighter and drier from here. Helping to spearhead these rescues is a familiar face. We've been following Anna Kukarina for months now as she saves abandoned pets after they were left to endure the bloody war alone. A former weightlifter, Kukarina now dedicates her strength to saving these helpless animals, feeding them, transporting them to veterinarians for medical care, finding them a safe place to stay, even taking in a few herself.
I won't leave them. I won't be able to ever, she says. You can't continue to live in peace when you save one life while thousands of others die.
It's a more dangerous mission now as the floodwaters crest across a major swath of the south. Thousands of Ukrainians abandoned their inundated homes after the dam was critically damaged. Residents waded through waist-high waters with children on their shoulders, their belongings in plastic bags. Some carried pets in their arms, but others were forced to leave their animals behind. Their only hope of survival, Kukarina and her fellow rescuers. Ukrainian officials say the flooding will leave hundreds of thousands of people without vital resources, including clean drinking water. People like Kukarina are moving quickly to address this, the latest crisis and threat to the lives of Ukraine's most vulnerable. Jason Bellini, Scripps News.
A surprise ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court today. The court siding with Alabama black voters in a congressional redistricting case. National correspondent Joe St. George explains how this ruling goes well beyond Alabama.
A surprise opinion at the Supreme Court today. A majority of justices siding with progressives and liberals in Alabama and around the country who have argued for months, really for years, that Alabama has unfairly drawn its congressional map. This case at its heart is whether Alabama violated the Voting Rights Act when they drew their map. Around 27% of voters in Alabama are black, but only one of the 7 congressional districts in the state is majority black. The Supreme Court could have sided with state lawmakers in Alabama. The Supreme Court could have said that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and race doesn't matter as much in 2023 and that the map drawn in Alabama is fine. But that's not what they said. In a 5-4 ruling, Chief Justice John Roberts, along with Associate Justice Brett Kavanaugh, 2 justices that on paper are conservative, sided with liberal-leaning justices to send Alabama's map back to the drawing board, telling lawmakers that it needs to be redrawn. Now, if you don't live in Alabama, this opinion from the Supreme Court still very much matters. It means that state lawmakers, when they draw their maps, typically every 10 years in our country, that race will still have to be factored in any decision-making. As a practical political matter, Thursday's opinion tells the country that the Supreme Court may be more conservative-leaning on paper, but that doesn't mean it will always side with conservatives. It also brings in the possibility that Democrats could pick up a seat in Alabama after these maps are redrawn, potentially impacting the balance of power in Congress next year. June, as a reminder, is typically the month where the most consequential opinions from the Supreme Court come down, like this one today. We are still waiting on consequential opinions involving student loan forgiveness, as well as opinions involving affirmative action. Joe St. George, Scripps News, Washington.
President Biden vetoed legislation that would cancel his plan to forgive student loan debt. The president said the relief is critical for millions of Americans, and the plan forgives up to $20,000 in federal student loan debt for those who make less than $125,000 a year. We're still awaiting a Supreme Court ruling on a legal challenge to eliminate the program, and it could come any day now. Special counsel Jack Smith subpoenaed Trump ally Steve Bannon in his investigation of the former president. The former White House strategist would presumably be asked about the January 6th insurrection and efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Also, a separate grand jury in Florida that's investigating whether Trump mishandled classified documents heard from another witness yesterday, and that's led to speculation any charges will be filed in Florida and not in Washington, D.C. The House Oversight Committee canceled a vote today to find FBI Director Christopher Wray in contempt of Congress. Republican Chairman James Comer of Kentucky withdrew the resolution after the FBI offered the committee a redacted version of a confidential document alleging a bribery scheme between the president and a foreign national. It's all according to the Associated Press. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is saying that his state played a role in migrants flying from Texas to California. Katie LeGrone with Scripps News Tampa shares new information about a Florida company linked to planning, arranging, and executing these flights.
You're looking at video and pictures released late Tuesday afternoon by Florida's Division of Emergency Management. The images show some of the migrants who the state claims volunteered to be transported and, quote, wanted to go to California. We blurred the video because we don't know the circumstances that brought each person here, but some are seen waving, smiling, expressing thanks.
Thank you for my room.
After days of silence, Florida finally claimed responsibility for 2 private flights that since Friday have flown roughly 36 asylum-seeking migrants from New Mexico to Sacramento as part of Florida's controversial migrant relocation program.
If there's a policy to have an open border, then I think the sanctuary jurisdiction should be the ones that have to bear that.
During a law enforcement roundtable discussion on illegal immigration in Arizona Wednesday, the governor for the first time answered questions about the flights.
If a sheriff asks for our support in Texas, we view this as an American problem. We don't view it just as a Texas problem, and we think we're all in this together. We will send resources to help.
It's a silly, cruel, inhumane, disgusting political stunt. Not one of these migrants is from Florida.
The surprise landing sparked outrage among California politicians, including its attorney general, who's now investigating for potential civil or criminal wrongdoing. He says some migrants implied they may have been lured into signing consent forms through false promises of jobs. Lawyers for civil rights, a legal advocacy group suing the governor over last year's migrant flights to Martha's Vineyard, are also investigating Florida's voluntary claims.
We know that Florida officials said the same thing about the Martha's Vineyard flights, and that turned out to be completely false.
But Florida is pushing back. In its only email taking responsibility for the flights, an emergency management spokesperson wrote, "The relocation of those illegally crossing the United States border is not new. But suddenly, when Florida sends illegal aliens to a sanctuary city, it's false imprisonment and kidnapping." Adding, the group of migrants were accompanied by a contractor, which California's AG has described as Vertal Systems, the same Florida-based aviation group hired by the state last year to fly nearly 50 migrants from Texas to Martha's Vineyard. In this newly signed state contract for similar services, Vertal even cites its more than $1 million Martha's Vineyard operation as part of its listed experience. The contract, which ends in 2 years, lists Vertal's scope of work as planning, arranging, and executing all parts of transporting migrants to other parts of the U.S. But the only listed price tag, Stage 1 development phase, at a lump sum of $487,000. This session, Florida's GOP majority approved a total of $12 million to relocate migrants. Individuals, they say, who volunteer and consent before they go. I'm Katie LeGrone reporting.
Coming up next on Scripps News Live, wildfire smoke gripping parts of the Northeast. Well, it's not going anywhere anytime soon. We're going to take a closer look at how that smoke is impacting respiratory conditions and tell you how you can stay healthy in the meantime. Plus, cities around the country revitalizing plots of land in urban areas to battle food deserts.
It was kind of sold as this is going to be this place and this alternative grocery store. And we planted hundreds of trees and anybody can come and just harvest and get what they want.
We'll show you how the project is taking community gardening to the next level. And don't forget, you can always count on Scripps News for all of your headlines throughout the primetime hours, beginning at 6 p.m. Eastern.
Are you ready for a fresh new bath or shower? Well, now is the best time with 50% off installation and no interest and no payments for 1 year. Hi, I'm Christina, and it's time to flip your old worn out bath or shower with Jacuzzi Bath Remodel today. Everyone knows the Jacuzzi brand. They're the most trusted name in water for over 60 years. But did you know they can install a gorgeous bath or shower that feels incredible in as little as 1 day? It's no stress and no mess with a lifetime warranty. Now let's talk beauty. You deserve to start and end your day in a beautiful space that feels great and is custom designed just for you. So call or go online now to see the Christina preferred designs like Canyon, Farm, and Urban. Now that's the total bathroom beauty that I love at a price you can afford. And how about safety? Like an ultra low profile, easy entry shower, complete with grab bars and a custom designed seat. You deserve safety and peace of mind without sacrificing style. Because with all the worries in daily life, taking a shower shouldn't be one of them.
Every time I stepped over my old tub, I worried I might fall. I don't have those fears anymore. Jacuzzi Bath Remodel gave me a gorgeous shower that's safe too.
I've been trying to get him to remodel that bath for years. I called and they did in just 1 day.
And at a price we could afford.
With one call to Jacuzzi Bath Remodel, you can effortlessly transform that old, ugly eyesore into the stunning bath or shower of your dreams that you'll love for years to come.
Call or go online now to jacuzzibathremodel.com to get 50% off installation. Plus, ask how you may qualify for no interest and no payments for 12 months. And when you call right now, we'll give you our complete safety upgrade for free. Go to jacuzzibathremodel.com or call 800-218-1279. That's 800-218-1279. Call now.
Do you spend hours maintaining your gutters? Save that time with LeafGuard's maintenance-free system. Call 1-833-2-GUTTERS. Mesh filters sit on top of your gutters, building up debris and eventually clogging. Then they need to be cleaned too. Honestly, your home should have been built with LeafGuard gutters. LeafGuard's wraparound hood deflects debris and keeps water away from your home. The one-piece seamless system is strong, 20% thicker than average and built to last. Plus, LeafGuard is guaranteed to never clog for as long as you own your home. Right now, get a complete LeafGuard system for only $99 down, $99 a month, and $99 installation. You'll also receive a $100 Visa gift card with a free gutter inspection and in-home estimate. Damage from clogged gutters can cost you thousands. Never worry about clogged gutters again. Don't wait, you've still got time. Call 1-833-2-GUTTERS today. That's 1-833-2-GUTTERS.
Cities, especially in the Northeast, dealing with yet another day of smoke-filled air, all thanks to these Canadian wildfires. We're giving you a live look right now at the skyline in New York City, where air quality alerts are being issued for the second day in a row. That haze has been reducing visibility, irritating people's throats and eyes. Tens of millions of people in the eastern U.S. right now are under air quality alerts.
Very, very scary, just walking down the street and feeling like I'm going to have an asthma attack. That's how bad the air quality is.
It feels like I'm at a campfire that I don't want to be at, and there's no s'mores.
New York saw its worst air quality in 20 years yesterday. The New York Yankees canceling their game last night. They hope to play 2 games today, even though New Yorkers are being urged to stay indoors. The Washington Nationals canceled their game today due to the bad air quality. National correspondent Alex Miller is in New York with a closer look at how the smoke has been impacting people.
Well, the city is getting much clearer. It smells much less like smoke than it did Tuesday or Wednesday, but quite frankly, you can still feel the impacts of the smoke, and officials are very concerned about the air quality levels in New York. Across the tri-state area, inbound flights delayed or halted for both LaGuardia and Newark airports Thursday morning as visibility remained low for pilots. The air quality in New York, the worst in decades, including after 9/11. Some schools in the New York and New Jersey areas outside of Manhattan canceled school. The Yankees canceled their game Wednesday night, but even indoor activities like a WNBA game or Broadway shows like Hamilton or Camelot closed its doors. And one actress in another show left the stage after 10 minutes because she said she couldn't breathe. New Yorkers pulling out their masks to avoid the immediate effects of the smoke.
I did wear a mask once it got really bad, and I wish I had a better mask actually, but it was, yeah, it was making me dizzy. My throat was kind of feeling weird and just not the best.
City officials handing out 1 million masks over the course of the day on Thursday at city parks, at subway stops, at bus stops in an effort to get people to mask up. But they really want people to stay inside until this goes away. Alex Miller, Scripps News, New York.
All right, Alex, thank you for that. And like she was just saying, millions of Americans right now are under an air quality warning. Now, those smoky skies are expected to continue for the next couple of days while these Canadian wildfires continue to burn. And doctors are concerned that the smoke could cause health problems for many Americans. Let's get you right out to Science and Health correspondent Lindsay Thies, who joins us now live. And Lindsay, we are moving now into day 2 of all of this. And I would assume that this is not good for your health. Who is most at risk at this point?
Well, there are a few groups, Veronica, that are more at risk than others, but you're right. This is not good for your health, especially if you were out in it yesterday. And then again today. As a matter of fact, doctors say even being out for like that 15-minute leisurely walk or going for a jog, if you are smelling outside and it smells like a wildfire or a campfire without the s'mores, like you heard that one woman say, you definitely want to be inside. Pregnant women, elderly individuals, and kids, doctors say especially, are the ones that they're most concerned about. Here's more.
Kids breathe faster, so they're moving relatively more air in and out, and so they will be potentially breathing in more particulate matter. Some of them, children that have respiratory illnesses are going to be at risk for getting sicker.
So with that outdoor protection, I know a lot of schools have canceled those activities. If your kiddos are out for summer already, best to stay inside where you can. And if you are inside, there are additional precautions that you need to take for yourself or for your family or friends. If you are outside, a couple of things you want to make sure you can do. We have these masks left over from COVID. You really want to look for the KN95s or even the N95s. They may have a NIOSH approved on them. I don't know if we can see this all the way up close on my camera. But those are going to be the ones that really are able to keep out that really fine particulate matter, the particulate parts of the pollution. They're tinier than a strand of hair. And that's the stuff that can really get into your lungs and wreak havoc, Veronica.
And that's what's so scary, Lindsay, is because, like you said, this is stuff that you really can't even see. And this is stuff that most likely is gathering in your lungs. Now, if folks are more impacted than others and they aren't feeling well, what types of symptoms should they be on the lookout for?
That's a great question. So if, let's say, you are an otherwise healthy adult, you're a non-smoker, you don't have any other underlying heart issues, for example, those types of symptoms that you're going to see, they're pretty acute, they're pretty short term, but they'll show up fairly quickly. We have some symptoms we'll show you on the screen if we have them listed. I know we've been showing them throughout today and yesterday, but we're talking about things like runny noses, cough, phlegm, that wheezing kind of cough. Shortness of breath is another big one. And then, as a matter of fact, headaches, feeling faint and dizzy. A lot of people yesterday, we're hearing reports of even just, their walk home from work or something, feeling those headaches. The good news is once you get inside, again, if you're someone who's otherwise healthy, they'll probably go away. If you are someone, though, who, let's say you have an inhaler, you want to make sure you're well stocked up on those medicines. Someone who has, allergies, asthma, or underlying heart or lung conditions, you're going to be the type of folks that might be even more sensitive and feeling some of the heavier symptoms related to this.
All right, so some good tips there. If you are feeling faint, dizzy, if you are asthmatic especially, you want to be on the lookout for these types of symptoms that could, make you feel even worse and maybe land you in the hospital. I was speaking with an expert earlier, Lindsay, who was telling me that the type of pollution that we're seeing in the air right now is actually 30 to 40 times worse than automobile exhaust. So this stuff is bad for you. It's bad for your lungs. It's bad for your health. Lindsay Thies.
I've heard I was just going to say another stat that I've heard from a doctor is very similar to the equivalent of being outside for like 15 minutes to smoking a cigarette in an hour-long period for multiple hours. So, yeah, this is intense stuff we're talking about, for sure.
All right, Lindsay Thies live from San Francisco. Lindsay, appreciate that. Thank you so much. In other news now, investigators will be releasing a report later today about the most destructive wildfire in Colorado history. Flames destroying nearly 1,100 homes by the time winds of up to 100 miles an hour died down. 2 people were killed. The fire in late December followed a lengthy drought and a lack of snow at that point of the winter. Experts are fearing that climate change will spark similar fires in the future. So food forests are expanding access to fresh produce, and they act as edible gardens in urban neighborhoods, and they change the landscape of food deserts. Scripps News correspondent Matt Pearl explores the greener side of city living.
So often, the stories we tell focus on problems. Problems that seem so massive, so ostensibly unsolvable, that any stream of a solution can seem like a rolling river.
Them snapdragons is really feeling you right now.
Celeste Lomax isn't thinking about rivers, just her section of garden in a place billed as something bigger.
We don't have healthy food in this area. That's why this was put here.
Lomax tends plants and grows greens on a 7-acre plot in an overlooked neighborhood of Atlanta. It's called the Urban Food Forest at Browns Mill. It's one of nearly 100 food forests across the country.
We're trying to mimic nature in the way that we plant and grow food.
Elizabeth Beek is a food system planner for the city of Atlanta. It's hard to sell any city on investing in a miniature forest trying to mimic nature. Instead, the pitch from Atlanta and the catch from the media spoke of the forest's power to solve a massive problem.
It was kind of sold as this is going to be this place and this alternative grocery store. And we planted hundreds of trees and anybody can come and just harvest and get what they want. Could have done the messaging a little bit better.
Food forests are about a lot. They grow food to give to the neighborhood. They bring green space to asphalt-heavy areas. They provide a community center for communities that typically don't get attention. And often, like in Browns Mill, they address racial disparities and inequalities. The 7 acres in Atlanta make up the largest food forest in America. But even here, its impact hardly papers over the issues.
We have funders and people who want to, see a result from a grant that they give. This isn't short-term, fast results, and I think we're used to that, and we want to see that in America.
It's what you call manicuring, cleaning it up a little bit.
On her plot, Celeste Lomax hosts yoga for the neighborhood and gardening classes for children. A few dozen yards away, volunteers fix beds, surrounded by trees and trails. And in its own way, a 7-acre spread plants a foothold in a community.
This is the first time I've saw fruit on this tree in 6 years. It's almost like having a little kid walking for the first time, It's like, oh, y'all gonna get me emotional on here because this is why I do it. Okay, cut. I hope this gives them hope. I think that's what we need more of, hope.
In Atlanta, I'm Matt Pearl.
Still to come, emergency rooms are turning away pregnant women desperate for care. Up next, Scripps News investigates why the systems to ensure quality care are failing the most vulnerable patients. Plus, a woman who considered dying by suicide 3 times has a message for others who are struggling with their mental health. We'll have her story next on Scripps News Live.
Welcome to the place where people go to learn about their Medicare options before they're on Medicare.
Come on in. You're turning 65 soon? Yeah. And you're retiring at 67?
That's the plan.
Well, you've come to the right place.
Now's the time to plan ahead. Learn about an AARP Medicare Supplement Insurance Plan from United Healthcare. And how a plan like this helps you take charge of your healthcare with lower out-of-pocket costs. Here's why. Medicare alone doesn't pay for everything. Your deductibles and copays could add up to hundreds, even thousands of dollars a year.
Everyone's a little surprised to learn that one.
Adding a Medicare supplement plan helps pay some of what Medicare doesn't. And that could mean fewer surprises and more predictable out-of-pocket costs. Call United Healthcare and ask for your free decision guide. Or talk with a licensed insurance agent or producer to learn more about plan benefits, options, and rates. Medicare supplement plans let you choose any doctor, any specialist, anywhere in the U.S. who accepts Medicare patients. You don't have to deal with any networks or referrals. This kind of plan also goes with you anywhere you travel in the country. If you're turning 65 soon or over 65 and planning to retire, find out more about the only Medicare supplement plans endorsed by AARP.
Thumbs up to that.
Remember, the time to prepare is before you go on Medicare.
Don't wait. Get started today.
Take charge of your health care. Call United Healthcare for your free decision guide and learn more about lowering your out-of-pocket Medicare costs and seeing any doctor who accepts Medicare patients.
Oh, and happy birthday or retirement in advance.
Create amazing work with Fiverr. All you need is your team and a talented freelancer who will lend a hand and seamlessly join your team from just about anywhere. Expand your team with a Fiverr freelancer.
Sure, you'll teach her how to drive a car, then use Greenlight to power her independence with crash detection with 911 dispatch, family location sharing, and emergency SOS alerts. Invest in your best investment with Greenlight.
Sunday nights on In Real Life.
Those for the baby?
Yeah! Scripps News journalists take you off the grid.
We were just a bunch of kids with a camera. Stunts have become more specialized.
And to the heart of the story.
When the pandemic hit, the American dream kind of changed.
There were a lot of warning signs. They just didn't care.
In Real Life, Sunday at 8, 7 Central, only on Scripps News.
Hey there, welcome back to Scripps News Live. It's now 30 minutes after the hour. Great to see you on this Thursday. Thanks for spending some time with us. I'm Veronica Cruz. Let's get you caught up right now on the day's top stories. So the U.S. Supreme Court gave a surprising victory to black voters in Alabama. The court ruled one of the state's congressional maps likely violated the Voting Rights Act. Alabama will now have to draw a new map for the 2024 elections. Chief Justice John Roberts and conservative Justice Brett Kavanaugh joined liberal justices in agreeing the way districts were drawn likely violated the Voting Rights Act. Well, the Vatican is saying Pope Francis is in good condition after surgery yesterday. The 86-year-old pontiff had intestinal scar tissue removed and an abdominal wall hernia repaired. The Pope had 13 inches of his large intestine removed in an operation in July 2021. He's going to remain in the hospital for several more days and has canceled all papal audiences through June 18th. Televangelist and one-time Republican presidential candidate Pat Robertson has died. The Christian Broadcasting Network founder is credited with making religious faith a central tenet of Republican politics. He helped to influence policy through his Christian Coalition. His son, Gordon, succeeded him as host of the 700 Club in 2021, though Pat Robertson continued to make appearances on the show until his death at the age of 93. So imagine racing to an emergency room in desperate need of medical help and being turned away. It's a violation of federal law for an ER to do that, but Scripps News uncovered hundreds of such cases across the country, and we were particularly struck by the number of incidents involving pregnant women who were refused stabilizing or appropriate care, some just as they were about to give birth. National investigative correspondent Lori Jane Gliha has been digging into these cases for months now. Here's what she found.
This healthy cry may never get old in Lisa and John Morrison's North Dakota home.
Good job.
They know how close they came to tragedy on the day little Paisley was born. Not at the hospital, a few blocks from their house, but on the side of this North Dakota highway in the front seat of their car.
I was doing 80, 85 down here. I was running with my flashers on.
The couple showed us the route they took on that chilly October night. It wasn't long after they first rushed to their local emergency room Lisa was 8 months pregnant. She worried her baby may be coming early. And then her water broke.
I knew it'd be not long and she'd be there because with my other girls, my water broke and they were there right then and there.
According to these records obtained by Scripps News, the hospital Lisa went to that night didn't have a maternity ward or fetal monitoring equipment. But the ER doctor did know Lisa had a history of rapid deliveries. So when he made the decision to send Lisa and John in their own vehicle to a hospital in Minot, 70 miles away, it surprised everyone. The doctor later said he felt the patient had plenty of time, but she didn't.
I had kicked my shorts off when I knew we weren't going to make it.
I knew baby was coming then. It was right between these two signs.
So the car's on a slant.
Yep.
You're leaned back.
Yep, I was laid all the way back. And then I had my legs here and here-ish, and then I just had her.
Lisa says first responders arrived just in time to remove the umbilical cord they said was wrapped around the newborn's neck.
The fact that the doctor said they couldn't allow you to have the baby at the hospital, but if you could have a baby in a ditch, what does that say to you?
I don't understand why they would send me without medical help when they knew how close I was to having a baby.
It hurts me and it makes me furious about it. If I was to lose her, I don't think I'd ever be able to move on. So I basically would have stood there and watched my whole world disappear.
It's a scary situation that never should have happened. There's a federal law in place to protect patients like Lisa called the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, or EMTALA. It requires most U.S. hospitals with emergency rooms to screen and provide stabilizing treatment to anyone who walks in the door with a medical emergency. But our Scripps News investigation found this law has been violated hundreds of times. In cases involving pregnant patients like Lisa, we discovered nearly 400 hospitals committed at least 683 violations since 2011, including many cases of women in active labor being turned away from ERs, and others refused treatment when they were bleeding heavily during a miscarriage. Our investigation found violations like these across 44 states, and some cases were linked to deadly outcomes. In Greene County, Alabama, for example, records we uncovered detailed the case of a newborn who died after her mother gave birth in a car in the hospital parking lot. Hospital staff told the woman the facility did not deliver babies and turned her away. These government documents we obtained reveal paramedics had to cut her pants off when they saw a bulge in her groin, and they found a blue infant that wasn't breathing.
Why is this still happening in 2023?
I honestly don't know.
Mary Ellen Palowich spent years at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, a federal agency that investigates cases like these.
I don't think hospitals are intentionally trying to violate EMTALA. I think they are trying to do the right thing the majority of the time.
When we talk to hospitals, some of them have even made in their own rebuttals, like, look, we're a rural hospital. We tried everything we could.
Yes.
We don't have these services. We're trying to do the best we can.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
It's fair, but it still doesn't give you a pass. I think it's important to understand that emergency physicians and those docs that specialize in emergency medicine, they're a jack of all trades. So it isn't okay to say, we don't have that service and you should go someplace else.
She says the government system of holding hospitals accountable when they do commit violations should be strengthened. Our investigation found while hospitals, including the one in Lisa's neighborhood, are required to take corrective action like implementing additional training, very few, only 3% since 2011, have been slapped with fines.
How well do you think these financial penalties are working? Are they set up in a way that's holding hospitals accountable?
If there were more enforcement actions, I believe they would be very effective. If those are increased and more hospitals start receiving large amounts of penalties, it will make hospital administrators rethink that approach, that you can't just think, oh, they're never going to find us anyhow.
We sent this email to the Office of the Inspector General for the Department of Health and Human Services, asking why there are so few financial penalties, and they ignored our question. But the American Hospital Association told us it is confident that hospitals nationwide are trying to provide the best care for moms and babies, regardless of any threat of fines.
Dr. Chris DiRienzo is a senior vice president with the American Hospital Association.
The practice of medicine is just not black and white. Some hospitals, for example, a rural critical access hospital, may not have a labor and delivery team on site. They're often very small emergency departments. And so if a mom comes in who's very high risk, who's premature and in labor, it's a really challenging clinical circumstance.
In Lisa Morrison's case, records show her doctor told government investigators, in retrospect, he should have done things differently. But neither Lisa's doctor nor her hospital agreed to an interview with Scripps News. Lisa says she would like an apology.
What would you want him to say? I mean, just to own up to that he made a very bad call in letting us go in our own vehicle. You trust the doctors around here to have your best interests at heart. It's scary.
Lori Jangleyha, Scripps News, Harvey, North Dakota.
Two old friends pedaling their way across the country advocating for organ donations. Straight ahead on Scripps News Live, why this mission is personal for both of them. And a woman who nearly died by suicide after coming out says that trauma triggered her lifelong battle with depression.
It's not just a bad day. It's not just a bad thing. It's being in the darkest place, in the lowest place, and not being able to see your way out.
Why she can finally see the light now, and her message to others who might still be suffering. We'll have her story after a quick break.
Do you have too much body fat? It tends to accumulate on your stomach, hips, and thighs.
Are you struggling to lose weight? Does it seem like no matter what you do, you just can't get rid of excess body fat?
Body fat builds over our midsection. Body fat increases from lack of exercise and poor diet.
The Obesity Research Institute has found the solution. It's called Lipozene. Lipozene is clinically proven to help reduce your body fat and weight. And to raise awareness about this weight loss breakthrough, the company is letting people try Lipozene risk-free for 30 days.
Now you can lose 4 times more weight. Just add Lipozene for only $29.95. Call right now and we'll double your order for free and ship it free too. And for a limited time, we'll double the size of each bottle for free. So now you have 4 times the Lipozene for just $29.95. Plus, you'll get Metabo Up Plus to help boost your energy and metabolism. But you must call.
Lipozene is clinically proven to help you lose body fat. In fact, a double-blind study showed that not only did participants lose weight, but 78% of each pound that was lost was pure body fat.
What's even more amazing is that people were not asked to change their daily lives. It's so easy. Just take Lipozene. That's it. If you're ready, then call the number on your screen right now. Lipozene is worth the price because Lipozene is clinically proven to work.
Now you can lose 4 times more weight. Just add Lipozene for only $29.95. Call right now and we'll double your order for free and ship it free too. And for a limited time, we'll double the size of each bottle for free. So now you have 4 times the Lipozene for just $29.95. Plus, you'll get Metabo Up Plus to help boost your energy and metabolism. But you must call.
Call 800-224-1751.
Attention all business owners. If you had W-2 employees during the COVID-19 pandemic, you may be entitled to up to $26,000 per employee with the Employee Retention Tax Credit. The deadline to file your claims is approaching. Call now to see if your business qualifies. This approved payroll tax refund program from the U.S. Treasury Department is set up to reward business owners who kept employees on payroll during the pandemic. There is no upfront cost to see if your company is eligible. Plus, if you don't receive a refund, you pay nothing. You want a trusted partner who understands the IRS guidelines. ERC advisors are standing by to help your business claim your COVID refund. You may be entitled to up to $26,000 per employee. This quick and easy call can get your business the money it deserves. Don't miss the deadline to file your claims. Just call 800-259-3916. That's 800-259-3916.
I had to replace my engine. The bill would have been over $4,000, but my Endurance Auto Protection Plan covered it all.
A broken AC unit costs over $1,800. A transmission, over $3,000. And an engine, over $4,000. Breakdowns used to mean paying thousands out of pocket, until now. Go to EnduranceWarranty.com or call Endurance today and stop paying for expensive auto repairs. Call 877-204-1467 or visit EnduranceWarranty.com for a free quote.
Quick reminder, we'd like to hear from you. You can always give us a call on our Scripps News viewer hotline toll free. That number is on your screen. It's 1-833-4-SCRIPPS or 1-833-472-7477. Feel free to share your comments and your story ideas. So the Biden administration's Pride Month celebration at the White House has now been postponed until Saturday. Officials pushed back the event due to poor air quality in Washington from the Canadian wildfires. This announcement coming after President Biden rolled out new initiatives to protect LGBTQ plus people, including mental health resources and efforts to counter book bans. And discussions over LGBTQ rights aren't always peaceful. Violence erupted between supporters and opponents outside of a California school board meeting on Tuesday, and it led to 3 arrests and prompted officers to use pepper spray to break up the crowd. Scripps News correspondent James Packard explains what triggered all of the violence.
Outside a school board meeting in Glendale, California, a violent clash between opposing groups as the board voted to recognize June as Pride Month. While speakers took to the microphone inside the meeting room, a brawl started outside. At least 3 people were ultimately arrested, among the reasons obstructing police officers and unlawful use of pepper spray. It's not clear which side was responsible for those actions specifically.
It's unnecessary curriculum.
Anna Kashishian has 2 kids in the Glendale schools. She's part of a group that showed up to oppose the district's curriculum on sexual orientation and gender identity. That, she says, is the crux of the conflict that became violent, not simply recognizing June as Pride Month.
My concern is that the curriculum, when it comes to LGBTQIA material, keeps growing and getting more inappropriate. I have a link to a number of books that have been adopted by the Glendale Unified School Board, which are displayed at the school libraries, elementary school libraries, that are unnecessary, inappropriate material.
Kashishian says far left extremists, she said, were affiliated with the Antifa movement were there. It's not clear so far if that's true. And while stickers affiliated with the far right extremist group, the Proud Boys, showed up on police barricades, it's also not clear if that group was present. The Glendale Police Department is investigating what happened. They told Scripps News the Glendale Police has not yet identified specific groups or individuals representing particular groups related to the protest. We have seen the online posts and we'll look to identify the agitators from both sides. At the core of the conflict, a nuanced debate about how much education students should receive about gender and sexual diversity and at what age.
Do you have an issue with the school generally teaching about gender identity and sexual orientation at some point?
At some point, meaning high school, 10th grade, 11th grade, that's fine, not in 3rd grade.
The school district superintendent was unavailable Wednesday, attending graduation. The district didn't immediately answer emailed questions about whether its curriculum on gender identity and sexual orientation has recently changed. Supporters say it hasn't. Kashishian says she's not homophobic. Some protesting outside Glendale's school board meeting held anti-pride memorabilia. And the brawl happened against the backdrop of increased anti-LGBTQ bills proposed across the country. The ACLU is tracking nearly 500 of them. And the Human Rights Campaign declared an emergency, saying the community is under attack.
That was James Packard reporting for us from Los Angeles. So it's not easy for LGBTQ individuals to remain resilient through the discrimination and the violence that they might face. Some can't bear the treatment and their mental health suffers. Jessica Large with Scripps News Norfolk shares the story of a woman who was in a dark place, but she managed to find her light. We do want to warn you that the story might stir up some difficult emotions.
She's the Hampton Roads woman with a heavenly voice. But singer Myra Smith says a lifelong battle with depression nearly left her dead.
I just felt like sleeping would be so much better than being awake.
Trauma-induced Smith's depression. She was only 6 years old when a family member raped her.
It's not just a bad day. It's not just a bad thing. It's being in the darkest place, in the lowest place, and not being able to see your way out, not being able to breathe.
She's tried to die by suicide 3 times in her life, including after she came out and her family and church rejected her.
And I just kept saying, I want to sleep forever, to live another day, knowing that these things have happened to me. I just want to sleep.
What do you say to the person who wants to go to sleep?
Yeah. If you could just hold on a little bit, just wait another day. Greater is coming. I remember doing my first album release. You were there. We sold out the Addicts Theater. And I remember looking up and God said to me, if I would have let you die, you would have never known this love.
Your life is worth living.
Dr. Christy Norwood says trauma and stress can send someone into a depression. You can also be predisposed to it if there's a history of it in your family. Previous research also linked it to a chemical imbalance in the brain.
Depression is really this sadness that lingers.
Depression, she says, is a medical condition that someone doesn't just snap out of.
Circumstances in life don't prevent someone from experiencing depression.
Absolutely. Medication and therapy together can often be the best course of treatment for depression.
Smith says that combination has kept her alive through the bad days so she can experience the good. And there's been a lot of good.
You're a wife.
I am.
To an incredible woman.
I am.
You are a mother.
I am.
You're a grandmother.
God to mighty knows.
You're a pastor.
I am.
Because I'm going to give God the praise.
After living and having all these great things happen, I would have never been able to know this love.
A love, a life she's determined to live, one day at a time.
Not today. After I woke up, one of the times, I tattooed on my arm, we're not gonna kill ourselves today. And I did that on purpose, because if I can just make it one day at a time, I've made it.
That was Jessica Larche there reporting for us. Now, if you or someone you know is considering suicide, please call or text the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. That number right there on your screen. It's 988. We'll be right back.
Are you or a loved one between the ages of 50 to 80 years old? If you are younger than 80 years old, do you receive Social Security, disability, or Medicare? If you answered yes, you may qualify for $30,000 in funeral insurance for only pennies a day. The average funeral costs around $11,000, and Social Security only pays $255, leaving your loved ones to pay the balance. Call now to see if you qualify for $30,000 in funeral expense coverage from Senior Legacy Life. Your rate will never increase, your benefits will never decrease, and there is no medical exam, even if you have a pre-existing disease or illness. Don't be a financial burden to your family. Lock in your rate by completing an application over the phone right now. Will you qualify for funeral insurance up to $30,000 for only pennies a day? Find out by calling Senior Legacy Life.
Call 1-800-300-5808 to speak with a licensed insurance agent. That's 1-800-300-5808.
There shouldn't be a stigma around talking about mental health or taking medication for your anxiety if that's what you need to feel better. And that's something I know firsthand. That's why I trust Hers. They help women access quality mental health care 100% online. Get started today at forhers.com.
When Lila was ready to sell her ring, she sent it to Worthy, where they took care of everything and auctioned it on her terms. Then, Worthy sent Lila her money. Get what you're worth at worthy.com.
Shopping for Father's Day is hard.
Actually, it's easy.
You never know what to get him.
Just give me steak.
It has to be perfect.
Yep. Dads want steak.
Right now, Omaha Steaks is offering Dad's favorite gift package that includes 4 of our exquisite bacon-wrapped filet mignons, 4 air-chilled boneless chicken breasts, boneless pork chops, jumbo Frank's dessert, and more. All for just $99.99. Save 61%. Order today at omahasteaks.com/TV and you'll get 8 burgers free.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
At Rue La La, feel like $1 million without paying the price. Seize the deals on top names before they're gone. Get in to never miss out. Shop RueLaLa.com today.
Confused by all the Camp Lejeune toxic water commercials? Let me answer some of your questions.
Are claims filed against the U.S. Marine Corps?
No. The U.S. government has set aside billions of dollars for those who have suffered. The Marine Corps will not be impacted.
Will a Camp Lejeune claim affect my VA benefits?
No. According to the VA, your right to VA benefits will remain intact. If you have questions about a Camp Lejeune claim, call the Driscoll firm now for a free consultation. 1-800-273-4800.
The why is where curiosity is intentional. Because when you ask the why behind the news, the world opens up before your eyes. The Why, Saturday nights at 8, 7 Central, only on Scripps News.
Welcome back to Scripps News Live. I'm Veronica Cruz. So 2 old friends have been on a cross-country trek and have been working to spread the message that organ donation can save lives. Rob Powers of Scripps News Cleveland caught up with them as they biked their way through Ohio.
From the seats of their bicycles, they search for a kidney and a cure. 69-year-old J.D. Norton and 70-year-old Tommy Taylor left Santa Monica, California, April 7th, advocating for organ donation, pedaling all the way to Boston Harbor, a trip of over 3,000 miles.
It can be grueling in the moment, but it's also fun. It is exhilarating.
There's been tough times.
Yeah.
But there's never been a minute we've regretted the trip.
Right now, there are more than 104,000 men, women, and children on the national list. 42,000 transplants were performed last year. But another person is added to that list every 10 minutes. And 17 people die every day waiting for an organ transplant. Tommy's wife had sarcoidosis. He says a lung transplant could have saved her life.
There's no doubt in my mind. That was our hope and prayer, that she would get a lung transplant.
JD's 8-year-old grandson Broderick is in need of a kidney right now. He's been on a wait list since October.
As a matter of fact, I talked to him on the phone today. He says, "Where are you?" And I said, "Cleveland." He said, "You made it that far?"
Well, Cleveland's happy to have you. Yes, they're in Cleveland for a quick rest, but JD and Tommy do not always have 5-star accommodations. They ride from sea to shining sea, hoping somebody sees their story and says, "Hey, I can help." This ride is all about that message. The fact that they get to hang together and get through it together, well, that's just a bonus.
We dipped our tires in the Pacific Ocean before we left at Santa Monica by the pier, and we're going to dip our tires in the Atlantic when we get there.
The second you sign up for organ donation, you become a hero for someone else. In your next hour of Scripps News Live, we're taking a closer look at the scramble to help thousands of migrants in New York City. I'm Veronica Cruz. I'm back with you at 3 p.m. Eastern. Don't go anywhere because Scripps News Live continues after a quick break.
Are you ready for a fresh new bath or shower? Well, now is the best time with 50% off installation and no interest and no payments for 1 year. Hi, I'm Christina, and it's time to flip your old worn out bath or shower with jacuzzi bath.